I'm no hero.
Wait.
Go ahead.
One second. We need proper introductions, Frank. Let us go through the honors. Anara, please.
Bob, can you turn off your video? Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I am Dr. Anara Tabashaliva, along with co-host Dr. Victor Fett, Dr. Katerina Shrey, and our program producer, Professor Larry Sherray. We host a weekly discussion panel on Russia's war on Ukraine with guests from Ukraine, military experts, medical personnel, academics, artists, literary figures, and relief workers. Our panel is recorded and circulated nationally and internationally. We appreciate your comments and feedback. Special thanks to Marshall University Libraries and MUIT for making this weekly event possible. If you're joining us live on Teams, please feel free to use the chat to post any question for our guest. A quick greetings to our viewers in Ukraine from Dr. Katerina Shrey.
Вітаємо наших слухачів в Україні з глибоким покліном. Ми далі свідки вашого страшного терпіння і також вашої великої сили. Дякую вам за вашу участь в нашій тижневій програмі.
Thank you, Katerina. Today's guest will be introduced by Dr. Victor Fett.
Thank you. It is my honor to welcome back Frank Hickey, joining us from New York now, who is working as a volunteer in Odessa, Ukraine, for most of the year. Mr. Hickey is a man of many trades, and as I understand, he is not only an accomplished novel writer, but also a policeman, detective investigator, who has worked in New York, in Savannah, Georgia, in Los Angeles, serving in high crime areas. And he talks about himself better than I could do. Please, Frank, microphone is yours. Tell us about your work.
Well, I'm working over there, as you know, as a volunteer English teacher, dance teacher, woman self-defense teacher, because the Russian soldiers are using sexual attack as a weapon of war, as they always have. And to repeat what I mentioned before, I am no hero. I spend free time at the beach and dancing in the discotheques and riding in the park whenever I have free time. I still feel a strong commitment to the people of Ukraine, to the people in Odessa. And again, I'm not Ukrainian. My family researched it. We are Irish and Jewish, no Ukrainian heredity whatsoever. But I feel this is everybody's fight, everybody's struggle, everybody's crusade. And that's why I'm over there. We are suffering 4 or 5 air raids per day, sometimes in the middle of the night. And just Monday, on the 24th, we had a rocket strike right near where I was living, with smoke coming up all day, really black and gray smoke coming up all day, and people were injured in that. And the rocket attacks continue all the time. Does anybody have any questions so far about this?
Please continue. We're eager to hear. And please.
You could spend a lot of time in Odessa and not realize that there is a war going on until the air raid sirens blow. And most people don't seem to pay much attention to it. I do. The only real notice you see are groups of school children with their teachers. When the air raid siren blows, they will go into the nearest shelter, and the shelters are marked all over the city, and the teachers will bring the children to that nearest shelter and keep them there. Apart from that, life goes on very much as normal. They advise you when there is an air alert not to drive your car or not to be a passenger on a bus. So for the first few weeks I was there, whenever an air raid sounded, I got off the bus. I found I was the only person getting off the bus. So that put a crimp in my traveling. And this most recent time, by surprise, every time I address a new group, I seem to find a new group that wants me to talk to them, discuss American culture, discuss American history, grammar, sentence structure. And so, like a hydra, these groups seem to be replicating themselves. Whenever I give a talk at Group A, another person from Group B will come up and ask me, can you be at our Group B this coming Friday? And so far, I've been able to say yes, 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 all the time. And as I mentioned before, I'm teaching 7 days a week. It does not leave much free time, what with travel and preparing lessons. I realize now why teachers drink alcohol. It has to do with the scheduling. And for every hour you spend in class, you should be spending at least 1 hour preparing the lesson. And that's what I've been doing. As a surprise, I was asked by one of my bosses to lecture at the police university in Odessa, to lecture the students between the ages of 16 and 20 about what it's like to be a policeman in America, what are the ethical choices they will have to make when they're policemen in Odessa. And we thought there'd be a few questions. There turned out to be 250 questions, which my boss had to transcribe into English and Ukrainian so that I could answer them at the next lectures. I find it very invigorating. The cadets are in a 4-year program to become either police officers or government prosecutors. And as I said before, that came out of the blue. I wasn't expecting that at all, but they apparently said, we have a former American policeman here. Maybe he can give us some insights about what it's like to be working there. Any questions so far? I think I see
You're
a hand.
Yeah, I do have one. Odessa is unnervingly close to the front lines of the Russian troops, and yet you say life goes on pretty much as normal. Is there a very visible Ukrainian military presence surrounding the city, a buffer that gives the people of Odessa some confidence to continue on with their daily lives?
Last year, I traveled to Kherson, which is 3 hours east of there, which was maybe 20 miles or 15 kilometers really from the front battle lines. And I saw no fortifications, if you will. In Odessa, there are certain areas where you cannot walk near the port. You cannot take videos of the harbor, the port harbor, because as you know, last July, when the Black Sea Grain Initiative fell through, the Russians targeted those grain warehouses and destroyed many tons of food that was meant for Africa and Asia. Apart from those restrictions, not being able to video or take pictures near the harbor and not being able to walk around there, there really isn't that much of what you would call stayed fortifications. The roads go back and forth. Going to Kherson, of course, when you come back or go there, you'll go through different checkpoints and have to show your papers. But I see no concentric ring of battle protecting Odessa.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And the young police cadets, as they were, female, male, tattooed, young, on their phones, very much reflect the youth of Odessa. And they seemed very interested in what it was like to be a policeman in America. I advised them, pay for your coffee, pay for your donuts. Life will be much simpler. Keep high ethical standards, because they asked me, one of the main questions was, what's the most important thing a policeman can have? And I responded to them, as I've always believed, you can effectively be a policeman without a gun. There are 19 countries that have unarmed policemen in them, including China and England. You can be a policeman without a badge, without a zanak on your chest, signifying that you're somebody different. But you can't be a policeman without a sense of integrity. You can't be a policeman if you make a mistake and try to hide it from your sergeant who then tries to hide it perhaps from his lieutenant and his captain, and it snowballs into a scandal which will leave you sometimes jobless, sometimes prosecuted. So I've always found it's best to own up to your mistakes as quickly as possible. Don't be tempted to hide anything or sugarcoat it. And that's the way I found to be successful as a policeman. And they seem to understand that. They seem to me, of course, very young. I reminded them and myself that I started this profession first as a private detective, then as a policeman a long time ago when I was 22 years old. So I've been in the business and I've seen it change a lot. And I'm hoping to bring some of those more modern changes to the Ukrainian police. I don't know how successful that will be. You never know with these things. Any questions so far?
Yes, you spoke about when air raids go that the protocol is to go to shelters, even though at this point they're so frequent or perhaps normalized that people don't. I'm wondering what those shelters look like. At the beginning of the war, the only images we saw in the West were people gathered in subway stations and as makeshift shelters. The shelters that you're talking about, are they long-term? Are they just meant quickly go there, hide 15, 20 minutes, come out, or are they meant to be places and God forbid something terrible happens for like long-term sheltering of people?
Odessa has no underground, no subway system. It does have catacombs that were built when the city was built. There are basements, of course, and the shelters I've been in have been in the basements of hotels, and some of them are just spare hotel rooms set aside for that. Others are very makeshift, that are just a couch in the basement next to a room with chairs. There is no food available there. There is always a restroom of various stages of disrepair. And people who go there are almost always tourists, not people from Odessa,
Oh,
people from foreign countries. I think I sent Dr. Fett a video of myself my first week when I was there in April. We had a bombing raid, and there were 20 students, maybe 15 students from China who didn't speak English very well. They were in the shelter and they seemed very frightened. And in order to calm them down, I spoke to them in my baby talk Mandarin and found out that they were all music students. And as I said, they were very frightened looking. This was alien to them. So in order to calm them down without any preparation or warning, I launched into Puccini aria from La Boheme, Que Gelida Manina. And the singer, the Chinese young man who was singing, sang it along with me perfectly. Every word, every note, much better than I could do. And he didn't speak Italian. He just knew the score. So we sang this aria, which goes on for about 2 minutes, and the other music students seemed to relax. That was a moment in the bomb shelters. And of course, the locals were watching us in surprise. They could tell I wasn't Chinese, but music was the international language that day. And I sent Dr. Fett this tape, and the tape went viral. The students posted it on their different social media accounts in China and around the world. But they were frightened because, of course, they didn't speak Russian or Ukrainian. They were not used to this kind of thing, and they were wondering what they had gotten themselves into.
Mhm. Well, that's amazing. That says a lot about your character to snap into mode to comfort the frightened. That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you. I hope we get to see the video at some point.
I found that I can try to show it right now.
I would love to see that.
Let's see. Keep talking, please.
Well,
Well,
so it surprises me that during wartime there are student groups visiting Ukraine. I mean, I would think. I mean, that's a surprise that other countries like I don't know that we have any American groups going to Ukraine. I have family and friends who go to Ukraine regularly to visit their family and friends, but that's different from an organized institutional trip. So that is a bit of a surprise.
It was surprising. And I think it has to do with the frequency of. From what the people told me before the war started, there were many foreign students there, but as you said correctly now, many fewer. They don't want to go there, and of course take a chance with the bombing raids.
So this was a group of music students from China. Is Odessa known for music?
Oh yes, oh yes. Even I knew that as a boy in Brooklyn. I think the famous violinist Ephraim Zimbalist came from Odessa. Odessa was always known, even by me as a boy, as a place of culture.
Wonderful, wonderful. It looks like we've got a video up.
Yes, let me see if sound will be available. 1 second.
There you go.
That's it.
You are a man of
I-
many talents.
I'm from a showbiz family in New York City, so we always believe there's an audience out there somewhere. You just have to find it. And that was a rare occurrence because, as I said, most of the time in the bomb shelter, I'm down there by myself, especially at night. When there are children with parents, they will go down to the shelter, usually until the all clear sounds. But there have been many nights where I would sleep in the shelter and get up at 6 o'clock in the morning when the all clear sounded on my phone, go back to my room and prepare for another day of teaching and physical work. I was making camouflage rags in what I call the rag factory, Triapki Fabrica, and I was also serving food and doing kitchen work to refugees who needed food. So I balanced that with going to the shelters every time the air raid sounded. And I thought it was a good idea to set an example to show everybody, yes, you should go to the shelters, no matter how boring or pointless it seems. It's better than spending time in the hospital or worse. And where I was teaching, especially on Sunday morning, entire blocks had been destroyed in the month of April. So it's not over.
The moment you described down there in that short little video clip, also, it's a great reminder how international our world has gotten. You have a man from Irish Jewish descent from New York singing Italian opera with Chinese students in Ukraine. And so I'm wondering, other experiences in the shelters, if you encountered, that certainly had to be a very memorable encounter, but are there other people you've come across in the shelters? You mentioned like women with young children. Anything else that kind of rises to the level of the Chinese student delegation?
No, there really hasn't. And I think one of the differences between World War II movies that we remember of sheltering in London, all through England, the arrival of the cell phone, people get very much wrapped up in cell phones, and they don't need to communicate with each other when they're on cell phones. And also, I assume they're probably getting the latest news about the bombing from their cell phones. For me, the news, much too late, much too little. I don't even bother to find out. I just pay attention to the announcement, which is given by Mark Hamill, the actor of Star Wars, saying, "Air alert, don't delay, proceed to the nearest shelter, don't delay, your overconfidence is your weakness." I understand Mark Hamill is donating his voice and his fame from Star Wars to help Ukraine during this war.
Wow.
And when the excuse me?
This is remarkable. It's remarkable how the entire world knows about what's going on and cannot do much to stop it. If I may ask, what do Ukrainians, what do Odessites talk about when you talk to them? How do they relate to the United States, to what has to be done in this war? Are they open about it?
Yes, Primarily, I would say most of them say, ask me, why isn't America sending us more ammunition, more ordnance, more equipment to fight? Why? That is a constant question that I hear from the more verbal people that I know there. Some want the war to end. A smaller group want the war to end, and they see American help as prolonging the war. So it's a tightrope I have to walk between different groups sometimes. But the primary question is, why is not America sending more? And I'm not a political scientist by a long shot. I try to keep politics out of the classes that I teach. I tell them, we're here to learn English. And if you have a question about that, please ask me in correct English, using correct English articles, and we can use a dialogue about that. But I try not to get too involved in politics. But to answer your question more fully, that's the main question they have. Why isn't America doing more? I would ask you folks that same question, putting it back to you, as it were.
It's the main question. Thank you. Any more questions, please, as we go to Frank? I could lead the talk to Odessa, where all my family is from, but I haven't been there in decades, so you know much more about what's going on right now. But more questions, please, if you have.
How long does this go till? 2:30 or 2? I'll come down at 2 and do it.
Yeah,
when you're
2.
done. Okay.
I think we have a little outside interference there. But I do have another question about you teach self-defense to women, which is remarkable and incredible. And it's so also very, very sad. Very sad that that is necessary, terrifying. The women who take your classes, is it the whole range, everybody from teenagers to retired people? Is it primarily working age women? Like is there just no trend? It's just everybody.
It is everybody. I have students who are 7 years old. I have students in the 70s.
And did they?
Tragically, the Russian soldiers do not discriminate on age or gender when they're attacking. And I do this to keep myself sharp, for one thing. I went through police academies teaching us these kind of things for years, and also to keep the students engaged physically. If they're dropping off, if they're not paying attention, if they're getting back on their phones, I will have them stand up and we will teach either ballroom dancing or, again, defense against sexual assault. And I find it keeps everybody on their toes, including me. And I find both topics fascinating, always have. And I incorporate these on my own initiative into the English lessons. Nobody expected this. I tell them, I promise you, this is the only English class in Ukraine where we're teaching cha-cha and how to break somebody's fingers, right? The only one. There is no other. This is unique. And they seem to respond to that. Some of them are very young, under draft age, the men, the boys, and I think they enjoy this.
Well, thank you. And thank you for what you're doing.
When it comes to air raids, I have my routine down pat. I have my backpack right by the door, filled with what's important: water, food, popcorn, food that will not spoil, a charger, books to read, notepad to write on, flashlights in case we lose power again, extra socks in case I get really tired walking around there. Usually I wear sandals down there. And when the air raid sounds, I try to make it a kind of a game, a black comedy game, how quickly I can get to the air raid shelter, which means throwing on my pants, which are already loaded with what I need, passport and money, etc., phone, sandals, jacket, shirt, backpack, and get to the elevator faster than anybody else if the elevator is running, and get to the shelter before anybody else gets there. Once I'm in the shelter, I kick off the sandals. I try to look as relaxed as possible. I play my theme song, which is the Blue Danube, the waltz by Richard Strauss, because I want people to be reminded of civilization in the middle of all this. I want to remind myself of civilization in all this. And I'll open up a bag of popcorn, offer it to people coming down, they'll accept it, or offer it to the staff of the hotel who are walking by the shelter all the time. And as you know, the Blue Danube has become more important a song since the Russians have rocketed and destroyed our warehouses in Odessa. Odessa is shipping a lot of food along the Blue Danube to Western Europe, not trying it on the Black Sea anymore. So the Richard Strauss waltz, the Blue Danube, has become kind of a political song, at least for me. And it's my leitmotiv when I'm in the bomb shelter.
That's remarkable. I remind our listeners, whoever wants to look at the map and find that the mouth of Danube is just a few hundred miles away from Odessa, sandwiched between Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine. Frank, a few words about foreigners in Odessa. Do you find yourself one of the few? You mentioned Chinese students, which was unexpected for the war zone Odessa. Are there many? What are they doing?
I know two Americans, North Americans, who are in Odessa. Those are the only Americans I know there. I see people very seldom from Africa, some from China. The Chinese people that I know work in a restaurant that's been in downtown Odessa for a long time. I don't believe they're students. I will usually, when I run into somebody who's obviously not from Ukraine, I will politely inquire, where are you from, as politely as possible. There was one man walking past who looked to be Black, and I asked him, "Excuse me, sir," and I said, "America or Africa?" He said Africa. He was in a hurry, and he kept walking, and I said, "Asante sana," which means "How are you?" in Swahili. That got him to stop and walk back to me and said, "Where did you learn that?" I had to tell him the Tarzan movies from a long time ago. And he was with the United Nations. But those are the only patently obvious foreigners that I would see there. And of course, you can go 5 days in a row without seeing any. There are not many.
I see questions hand up with Anara. Please, Anara, our moderator.
Thank you very much for your amazing stories. I have a question because you were from the beginning or for a long time, longer than other. How people, girls, women, boys have changed since the 2022? Because initially it was actually a little bit unexpected. And then as a teacher and as activist, what could be done to improve education for boys and girls? And what could be done to improve police service? Because that's still actually Soviet style of education and I suspect, and police service too. You probably noticed this. Thank you.
No, I want to ask you to define Soviet style of education. Could you explain that to me, please?
I think that of course, it's changed, but Soviet style, it's a good emphasis on the math courses and very little actual emphasis on civic education and other actually literature. For instance, if you consider literature, there are most emphasis on the Russian literature and so on. So it's visible that it's very, very important to change education in the future, because for us, for other post-Soviet countries, Ukraine is a leader, and in the future, Ukraine will lead the free world and further independence. Thank you.
Well, to research it, I found that Ukraine enjoys 100% literacy, 100% literacy, and America enjoys 92% literacy. And I've tried to introduce American themes to my students, international themes, as it were. We are not, in my book clubs, we are not studying Russian literature. I left them last week with the assignment to start reading the Ian Fleming books about James Bond, because those are very much a period pieces of the Cold War era, and they're written in clear English. Fleming was a journalist for most of his professional life, and they're very international books and easy to read, and I think well written. I was also showing them different pieces of American cinema, once again, to enhance their command of the English language, documentaries, and more interestingly, movies like All the President's Men about the Watergate scandal of 1972, 1974. Very few of them knew about it. And also to show them what the racial situation was in America from the time of slavery up until the present day. They don't know very much about that. Once again, as you say, that could be from the Soviet style of education. I find them very willing to learn about new things and surprisingly well read, even the young people, in English language writers. It surprises me. I think they're way ahead of American students of that same age. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And I just would like to know what could be done to improve service of police men in Ukraine, say.
The service woman?
Yeah, you
Service
see,
who?
yeah, that's as a professional, what you can see there and what you can suggest to your peers in Ukraine.
About police work?
Yes.
All right. I would give the same lecture that I give to American policemen. Patrol on foot, make friends with people, even if they're boring. I find most people to be very interesting. So maybe I'm easily amused. I don't know. But I worked in some of the worst areas in America, and I found that walking and talking with the people who live and work there pays untold dividends forever and ever. You will learn about the life there. You will go behind the mask that they give to anyone in uniform. I would urge any Ukrainian policeman to do the same thing. And I never saw the police in Odessa stop anyone on foot. The only people they stop are in cars. And they have a reputation for being somewhat free and easy with integrity. And this would come about naturally if somebody has a car, they have enough money to pay a fine or not pay a fine. And those are the only stops, as we call them, vehicle stops, that I've seen. I have never seen them stop a person on the street. And I live in one of the toughest areas of Odessa, and I see a lot of people that need police attention, and they're not getting it. And I'll see a lot of people sleeping in doorways. Of course, that's not a crime, but at the same time, it gives you an idea of the tenor of the neighborhood. Somebody was murdered on my street in the month of April with a knife by a homeless person. And I don't see the police in Ukraine. I know they have other things to worry about. However, we learned in America, especially in New York, when you take care of the small problems, the bigger problems do not develop as quickly. If you are responsive to the needs of people who are working and living in an area, the master criminals, the drug dealers, the dangerous people with guns, they will take notice of this, and they will not be wanting to be around where you are because, first of all, they're afraid you're communicating with them. I did this in California, especially, where I would speak Spanish to the people working in the stores, Mandarin to the people in the restaurants, Arabic. We had people from Sudan working in stores there. And this made the criminals, or the drug dealers, if you will, very apprehensive because they didn't know what we were talking about. And there's an expression in English, the guilty run away when nobody's chasing them. So I want to be chasing them without chasing them. And I don't see that kind of interaction in Odessa. And to be fair, I didn't see that in a lot of American policing either. It's a very new idea. I don't know how many people in the audience are from New York or know New York, but when they started this program in New York, we had 2,245 murders a year. Then we started getting proactive, and I was a policeman here during those years. And last year we had 386 murders in the same city, which is extraordinary. And a lot comes from citizen feedback. A lot of it comes from police reacting to that. A lot of it comes from the commanders letting the police officers talk to people without fear of corruption, without fear of romance springing up among the officers. And in New York, you can see the dividends. I know that the conservative information machine says New York is dangerous, it's terrible, it's going down the drain. I've been going to the park in New York for the past 3 years, lying down on a blanket with my friends, reading, dozing, spending the day there. I've never seen any criminal activity. Never. And believe me, I look for it. I don't want to be in the middle of it. So New York has really changed. 30 years ago, it would have been very different going to that same part of the park.
Good. Thank you very much for your answer.
You're welcome.
I have a question. Actually, two interrelated questions. The conscription age was lowered not too long ago. What is the current conscription age in Ukraine? That's the first question. The second question is, how many people below that conscription age volunteer, despite the fact that they're not being conscripted, but they join voluntarily, just as in this country, if you're 18 years old, you can join the military. So those are the two questions.
I believe, from what I know, and I'm not up on this all the time, you cannot leave the country if you're 18 and 60. You also cannot leave the country if you're a doctor, a dentist, or a pharmacist of any age, because they will need you, or they may need you. I believe the conscription age was dropped down to 26 or 27. I'm really not sure. The internet would have more accurate information than I would. My students, when they're in their teens and they're not in the military, I don't ask why. They may have physical problems, they may have cognitive problems that keep them out, they may have communicable diseases. So I really don't get into a discussion with them about why they're not in the military. I don't feel that the war has great support among the people, the men of draft age. I could be wrong. I don't go knocking door to door and asking these questions, but it's just a feeling that I have because the army is going from place to place and finding people who they want to conscript. And you see them on the streets checking papers once in a great while. But the feeling I get is that it's not very popular right now to be in.
Okay. So you're suggesting that it's not a large percentage of the population between 18 and the mid-20s who voluntarily go into the military.
From what I know, I would say not. And as you know, probably better than I do, there's been criticism about the leadership. When the war first started, the Ukrainian Foreign Defense Legion stated that they had 20,000 foreign volunteers. Now they're between 1,000 and 2,000. And I would hope that they weren't all killed. And they modified their recruiting requirements At the beginning of the war, they said, we will take paramedics, we will take police officers, we will take soldiers from other countries. Then they found out that paramedics and policemen do not necessarily make good combat soldiers, and you were always able to leave without any problem. And I believe that a lot of them left, perhaps because they saw the quality of leadership, the length of training. In our American Civil War, sometimes training was 1 week. And when you give people not enough training, they tend to leave. They said, this is not going to work for me. So I don't see the war as very popular. But once again, it's a hot topic that I try to avoid.
Interesting. Okay.
Thank you very much, Frank. We will wait for more questions if people can formulate them. I had a question. Without, of course, naming people, could you single out a few remarkable personalities that you have met or maybe didn't expect, two friends you made, or just interesting people in Odessa?
I've met an American who's been there for 6 years and is teaching English. And he makes no plan to leave. To me, that's pretty remarkable. He probably feels comfortable there. I have met other people who come from New Zealand who are there helping the refugees on a daily basis, working with them, getting them settled. They have an acronym, I think it's IDPs, International Displaced Persons, and they are the people who we would call DPs in World War II, displaced persons who have nowhere to go. And there's a remarkable amount of people who are volunteering, and they're not Ukrainians. They feel that this is something that the whole world should be doing. And I've met people from Canada doing this, and from England. And it's, to me, really remarkable. They're taking the same risks I am. And aside from bombs, war doesn't help anybody's feeling of serenity, peacefulness, or faith in the future. It's an uncertain situation that we're in. And as I tell myself when I'm there, in wartime, nothing feels normal. Everyone is traumatized to some degree or another. So I think it's remarkable these people from other countries, other ethnic backgrounds, feel that they should come and help out as best they can.
Thank you. I need to read now in back translation. I'm translating from Russian. I got email from one of your viewers, elderly lady who watched your previous presentation also, and she gives the best to Frank for his volunteering in Odessa, wishes your health and admires you for your optimism and talking about Odessa today. She is from Odessa, and now she resides, of course, in Little Odessa in Brighton Beach, which you probably know better than Big Odessa. Our viewers may not be familiar with this section of Brooklyn, if I'm not mistaken, the New York Odessa on the boardwalk. You have mentioned crime, which was not something we normally discuss in context of the war, but you're a policeman. Would you say that crime level in Odessa, from what you have seen and heard, is reasonably subdued, or is it a big problem?
I would call it a big problem because I did statistical research on this to talk to my class about it. They seem to feel that there was really no crime in Ukraine. Whereupon, as I always do with the younger generation, I said, get out your phones, which are in their hands anyway, get out your phones and check that. And as a policeman who was interested in statistics, you learn to only check murder statistics because people have their cars stolen, they don't report it. People have their houses broken into, they don't report it. People are in a casino and they get robbed. They don't want their wife to know they're in the casino. They don't report it. So all kinds of things like that. But murder is usually reported very clearly. And before the war in 2021, Ukraine had the overall murder rate of 4.3, which is 4.3 victims for every 100,000 people. That's how these statistics are usually gathered. And America, same year, had 6.4 victims for every 100,000. So as I said to my students, writing this on our blackboard, there is crime in Ukraine before the war. There is murder in Ukraine before the war. There are hostilities, maybe between different groups. There is a feeling of machismo in the clubs at nighttime. I know it, I try to avoid it. But you get the feeling that things could happen, things could get worse. So there is crime, and I want them to be aware of this. I don't want them to think that they're living in a crime-free paradise. And I haven't been able to check the statistics since the war began, but I don't think the war makes any place safer. I think if anything, it makes it more dangerous. And there's difficulty in getting these statistics because they have more important things to worry about than civilian murders at this time. Some American cities downplay their crime. Chicago, for example, was notorious for years. The federal government wouldn't accept any crime statistics from Chicago because they said they're false. We're not going to propagate their myth that this is a safe city. And now it's become revealed as one of the most dangerous cities in America. And you're in Virginia, as I recall correctly, yes?
We're in West Virginia.
Okay, West Virginia.
West Virginia,
North.
not Virginia.
Oh, excuse me?
We're in the state of West Virginia, which
Okay.
has been separate since Civil War.
I know,
1803. Yes.
West Virginia.
Thank you.
Charleston, West Virginia has quite a reputation for being a dangerous town in America, if I remember the statistics correctly.
It is not without it, yes. Any more questions from our moderators or panel, please? Frank, as they think about questions, are you heading back?
Oh, yes.
Odessa.
I have to. I want to.
We applaud your courage and, well, you said you are not a hero, but you're doing what not many people do in America. So as this terrible war goes on and there is no end, in our view, from outside, what do people think from inside? We hear so much from outside about willingness of different politicians to cut the deal with Russia and accept Korean scenario or any such kind. You said you are not discussing politics, but you should have heard general mood. Are people willing to live like this? Or, well, I don't want to ask if they want to surrender, but what do you hear there?
I hear, as I said before, a small group of people who will speak to me about saying, we have to stop this. This is not going anywhere. We are losing our country. We're losing our young people. We have to cut a deal. We have to make arrangements with the Russians. We don't want America to send us any more aid because that will only prolong the war. As I said, this is a small group that says this.
But what does that group want? Do you like what the so when they cut a deal, what I'm just like to see territory, and then like do you know what when they say we have to stop? It's like what do they want Ukraine to look like? What did they think is going to happen if they cut a deal with the Soviets?
I think
Sorry, with the Russians, God almighty.
I think they feel that they should yield the territory that the Russians already have and create a new Ukraine where where there's no war. I don't think that's a good idea because I don't see the Russians stopping of their own volition. I don't see them becoming instantly more civilized towards civilians. I don't see them abiding by a treaty because they lost all that when they started the invasion. I don't see that as happening. I don't see that as possible. I know what happens to other countries when they lay down their arms and say, we surrender. It happened in Holland in 1940 and ended with Anne Frank and her family getting killed in the concentration camp. There was no peaceful place in Europe in World War II except for Switzerland, where you could say, okay, here we're safe. There was no place safe. And why is a country like Russia going to obey a treaty? I don't see any reason for them to do that. They lost all honor at the first day of the invasion, as far as I'm concerned, and they haven't done anything to regain it. Once again, I'm telling this to my friends here in New York, in America. I'm not talking about this over there.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Yes, this is very well said, and we agree on that definitely. It's hard to imagine what would happen if Odessa suffered the fate of occupied cities of the Azov coast, or Kherson, which was liberated by Ukrainians later. Do we have more questions, please?
I
If
have
not,
a-
we're near
yeah,
the
I
hour.
have a
Yes,
question.
Anara, please.
Yeah, question is not related to the Ukraine. I like a painting behind you, a picture. What is this? Tell us about this picture. Very beautiful.
I have no, it's a Japanese painting.
Okay.
A friend of mine has it in the apartment. I have no
Oh.
idea what it,
Oh, I'm sorry.
okay, I find it very soothing. I'm glad
Yes.
to look at it. I'm very happy to see it. And as we're talking about the war, as I mentioned to Dr. Fett before, when the war began, I tried to get into the Ukrainian Foreign Defense Legion. I brought my resume and my papers to the military consulate, and all they could say to me very politely was, Dedushka, grandfather, you're over our age limit. We can't take you. Sorry, no, thank you. We can't take you. Dedushka, spasibo большое, Yaku, but we can't take you. So that's been kind of my mantra ever since. If I can't do what the Army would like me to do, what I'd like to do in the Army, I will create my own jobs over there, my own idea of service, and do whatever I can to help Ukrainian people in this instance. And that's what I've been doing, including the cha-cha lessons, to make everybody.
This is remarkable, and thank you for taking our time to talk with us. We will try to disseminate this recording and your stories as well. I asked you about extraordinary people you have met. You mentioned this New Zealand group, and I'm sure there are many who would love to connect to any of them who would want to talk. If anything, we are doing here, at least I think we give a platform in English for those who do not have their own channels or ways to communicate. We connect some people. There are many who came to talk to us, and we are not stopping. If anything is continuity, such it is important. And again, thank you from all of us for what you are doing. You are remarkable.
Thank you very much.
We'll thank you and wish you all the best. And I will ask Dr. Shrey to say her greeting to our Ukrainian viewers, please.
Дорогі браття і сестри в Україні, ми зберігаємо вас у наших щоденних думках і молитвах. Нехай милосердний Бог тримає вас у своїй опіці, До наступного тижня. Прощаємося.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!